Picture this: a quest for justice that leaps across national boundaries. That's really the heart of what we're diving into today, this complaint filed by citizens of Myanmar
Yeah.
with the Philippine Department of Justice.
Right, and it's quite something. You've got people from one country essentially looking to another nation's legal system to hold their own government accountable for alleged war crimes. It's a pretty bold move, you know?
Exactly. So let's try and unpack this a bit. Back in October 2023, the Chin Human Rights Organization, the CHRO, and also some individual Myanmar citizens like Nguyen Thong Lan, I think his uncle, a pastor, was reportedly killed.
Hmm.
They took this, well, significant step. They presented a war crimes complaint straight to the Philippine DOJ, urging them to act. But here's the immediate twist. The DOJ initially undocketed and returned it.
Which, immediately makes you ask why. Why turn it back? What were the legal arguments, and what made the Philippine DOJ say no at first?
Well, the complainants are really leaning on a specific piece of Philippine law. It's called Republic Act Mon 9851.
The Philippine International Humanitarian Law Act?
That's the one. They're arguing this law actually gives the Philippines the power, the authority, to prosecute certain, really grave crimes, even if those crimes happened outside the Philippines.
Okay.
And the people they're accusing, we're talking top figures in the Myanmar Junta. Senior General Min Aung Hlaing is named, along with other key members of the military leadership.
These are the leaders who took power after the 2021 coup, right?
Fine.
The one that ousted Aung San Suu Kyi. It's important context, I think, that this coup led to widespread resistance, and Chin State was a major center of that resistance.
Precisely. And the allegations themselves, they're incredibly serious. We're talking about accusations of murder, family members killed, the systematic burning of homes.
Yeah, horrifying stuff.
And forcing tens of thousands of Chin people to flee, mostly into neighboring India. The reports we've seen describe these terrible scenes where people trying to put out fires engulfing their homes were allegedly shot and killed by Junta forces.
Just awful. It really paints a stark picture of the human cost of this conflict and the subsequent struggle to find any accountability. And the legal tool they're trying to use here is particularly interesting: universal jurisdiction.
Okay, let's make sure we're clear on that. Universal jurisdiction. It's this principle in international law, right? It basically says some crimes, think genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, are just so fundamentally awful.
So heinous, yeah.
That any nation has the right, maybe even a duty, to prosecute the people responsible. It doesn't matter where the crime happened or who the victims or perpetrators are in terms of nationality.
Exactly. So what the complainants are saying is, look, what happened in Chin State, allegedly done by the junta, fits this category of exceptionally grave crimes. And they're asking the Philippine DOJ to step up and exercise this universal jurisdiction, even though it all happened in Myanmar and involves non-Filipinos.
It's a huge ask, really, asking one country to effectively police events within another sovereign nation.
It really throws that whole idea of global accountability into sharp focus, doesn't it?
It does. So just to kind of recap where we are, Myanmar citizens file this war crimes complaint in the Philippines against their own military rulers. They're using Philippine law, specifically RA 9851, and invoking universal jurisdiction. The allegations concern terrible violence against the Chin people after the 21 coup. And initially, the Philippine DOJ said no, they undocketed and returned the complaint.
Right. And just to be clear, undocketed and returned basically means the DOJ refused to even formally start the process. They wouldn't take it on. And their reasoning, as the sources show, was pretty straightforward from a traditional legal standpoint anyway.
Which was?
Well, that the complainants weren't Filipino, the accused weren't in the Philippines, and the alleged crimes didn't happen on Philippine soil or against Filipinos. It's that classic view of jurisdiction: a country's laws generally apply to its people and its territory.
Got it. But the story doesn't end there, does it? The complainants haven't just walked away.
Not at all. They've filed what's called a motion for reconsideration. They're pushing back, arguing that these alleged war crimes absolutely do fall under universal jurisdiction. They're citing international law, precedents, and even something they call the law of humanity.
The law of humanity. That's quite a phrase.
It is. And their lawyer, Rommel Bagares, makes a really critical point here. He points out that the DOJ itself, even when returning the complaint, acknowledged something important.
What was that?
That the facts as presented by the complainants do line up with the definition of war crimes under Philippine law, under that very RA 9851.
Ah, okay. So the DOJ wasn't saying these don't sound like war crimes. They were saying Even if they are, we don't think we have the authority to prosecute them.
Precisely. The issue wasn't the nature of the alleged acts, it was the jurisdiction.
Right. And Bagares argues that this very acknowledgement from the DOJ that, yeah, these look like war crimes under our law, actually strengthens their case for a full investigation. They want the DOJ to issue subpoenas to compel the Myanmar generals to answer these charges formally.
It's a logical next step in their legal strategy.
Now, here's where another interesting layer comes in. Bagares also mentions the recent situation with the International Criminal Court, the ICC, issuing an arrest warrant for former Philippine President Duterte.
Ah, yes, related to the war on drugs allegations.
Exactly. Bagares suggests this development, the Philippines engaging with the ICC process regarding Duterte, might actually kind of create new momentum for the Chin case in Manila.
That's a really fascinating connection he's drawing there. The thinking seems to be, well, if the Philippines is now dealing with international justice mechanisms concerning alleged crimes against humanity domestically, perhaps that signals a greater openness, maybe, to considering universal jurisdiction for grave international crimes committed elsewhere. It could suggest a potential shift, a broadening view on accountability.
Like if you engage with international justice in one context, it might make it harder to completely dismiss it in another, a sort of consistency argument.
Potentially. It's speculative, of course, but it's an interesting political and legal dynamic to watch. It raises the possibility of a change in how the Philippines approaches these kinds of international legal principles.
Okay, so let's pull all these threads together. We have Myanmar citizens seeking justice in the Philippines for alleged war crimes by their own junta.
Check. Based on universal jurisdiction.
Right. Their case rests on this idea that the alleged crimes are so severe they transcend borders. The Philippine DOJ initially refused, citing lack of direct connection, no Filipino victims, perpetrators, or territory involved.
But the complainants are fighting back with a motion for reconsideration, highlighting that even the DOJ concedes the alleged acts fit the definition of war crimes under Philippine law.
And then there's this potential X factor, the ongoing ICC situation involving former President Duterte, which some suggest might influence the Philippines' stance on universal jurisdiction moving forward.
It really puts the spotlight on that fundamental tension, doesn't it, between national sovereignty, the right of a country to manage its own affairs, and this growing international idea that some crimes are just too terrible to ignore, no matter where they occur.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
It forces us to think about the role, that individual countries might play or should play in upholding these broader ideas of international justice.
Yeah, where does one nation's responsibility end and another's begin, especially when we're talking about crimes against humanity?
So as we wrap up this deep dive, maybe the big question to leave everyone mulling over is this. Considering all the complexities, international law, national sovereignty, the practical challenges, what are the real-world ethical and practical implications when one country decides or is asked to prosecute alleged war crimes that happen in another country involving non-citizens?
It's a profound question. There are no easy answers. And the outcome of this specific case in the Philippines could set a really interesting precedent one way or the other. Definitely something to keep an eye on.